want to bring out and give a round of applause for, please, Mrs. Singleton from the English department. So she's going to be doing this thing called impromptu poetry, which is an event we've been doing for, I don't know, close to 10 years, maybe something like that. She has not seen these 15 words until just now. They're also in the envelope. Do we have any Singleton seniors? You do. Yeah, these were words that were largely created by Mrs. Singleton's class. So, and these are the good ones. They had some torturous ones that I left off. You can thank me later. So Mrs. Singleton's gonna head out, and she has to write a poem using these 15 words and any others she wants before we call her back out with about 5 minutes to go in the period. Okay? We'll see what she can do. Good luck. Next up, we have a student for you. Today, and this is super cool because if you've seen this event before, you know that the past couple of years it's been difficult to get students up on stage reading their work. But usually when students do come up to read their work, they're like sophomores, juniors, seniors. And today we actually have a freshman, which is really fantastic. Are there other freshmen in the audience? All right, here you go, folks. You're being represented. Please give a big round of applause to Maddie.
Hi, my name is Maddie. This speech is inspired by the writing I did in my lit class for the book called The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. It highlights how minorities often face discrimination, neglect, and injustice simply because of their ethnic background, but it also showcases how the same people are able to fight back by persevering and using their voices. There's a moment in every Black girl's life when she realizes that society has already made ground rules for her. There are invisible lines she learns to avoid, drawn by misunderstandings and false narratives painted against her. There are lists of agreements she's forced to sign, ones that control how she speaks, how she behaves, how she exists. Unfortunately, these rules often reveal themselves in places meant for belonging, like teams, hallways, classrooms, or conversations with peers. She notices the comments, the ones that aren't said aloud but quietly follow her, that she's too loud, too sassy, or that she laughs too loud and adjusts her tone too quickly. When she's indirectly told to tone it down, she becomes hyper-aware of how the color of her skin compares to that of her classmates and how she feels smaller simply because of these so-called ground rules. Fortunately, there's another moment in every Black girl's life when she realizes that expectations and stereotypes placed on her will never be fully satisfied and that she has the right to live unapologetically. Being forced to endure harsh societal expectations and judgments because of the color of her skin often feels inevitable. In some spaces, a girl of color can laugh honestly, speak however she wants, and exist freely. In others, she's forced to silence her voice, soften her actions, and hide showing who she truly is. Even today, those in power especially try to decide which voices are heard and which are ignored, subtly shaping the world around us. Whether in school, public spaces, or online, the constant pressure to conform to someone else's ideas never lets up. That's unfortunately our reality, or my reality. For me, choosing to speak out or simply remaining true to myself in places that once made me feel small has been a lesson that identity cannot be dictated by anyone else's words. By refusing to be held down by conventional standards, I reclaim my voice, and most importantly, myself. The world may try to quiet us and its weight may feel impossible to carry, but it cannot shake what is true. Despite it all, I don't give in. I speak louder when silence is expected and move boldly when I feel pushed to shrink. Every step I take is an act in resilience of itself. It becomes a quiet vow, a refusal to be made small in a world determined to shrink us. But in doing so, I've also come to understand that this lesson extends far beyond my own experiences. The freedom to be true to yourself should belong to everyone, no matter who you are, how you identify, or where you come from. The right to express yourself fully should never have to be justified. The world may try to shape you into something easier to understand, but our differences are not something to hide. They're worth embracing. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. That was fantastic. That's what this is all about. We want Writers Expo to be a celebration of all of you and the individual voices that you bring into our building each day. So if you're not a senior, one thing to consider, what do you have to share with us? You've still got a year, 2 years, 3 years to potentially do that. Consider it. Whoever's in the booth, could you go back to the very first slide of the slideshow? So this is kind of the quote for the year for Writers Expo. Writing is a labor of love and also an act of defiance, a way to light a candle in a gale wind. And I feel like, Maddie, you just gave us a light in a gale wind, and I feel like there's so much of that going on in this building. So that's my challenge to you guys. Let's hear it. Copy Maddie's example, and next year will be best Writers Expo ever. Maybe. We'll see. All right. Can we just give another round of applause to Maddie? All right, next up we have one of my favorite events here at Writers Expo. It is called Two Truths and a Lie. Here is how it works. We have 3 faculty members, each of whom is going to tell you a story. 2 of the stories are true, 1 is completely fictitious, and you guys are trying to figure out which is the lie, okay? Now, after all 3 stories are read to you, you're going to have a chance to ask questions to try and sniff out the liar. So while you're listening to the stories, keep the thinking caps on, come up with questions that can kind of probe who might be lying, and I promise we'll get to you after the stories are done, and it's usually a pretty good time. Let's welcome our teachers, our staff members. We've got Ms. Elmore from the math department, as well as Ms. Rende, and from security we got DJ. Come on out, folks. Okay, so I am going to allow them to use the podium and the mic, and then whoever's not reading can take a seat in the chairs, and then whoever reads can come up on, to the podium. Who do you guys want to hear from first? Because you get to decide. DJ's first, all right.
Figures. Welcome, everybody. Test, there we go. Well, it was early in the 1990s. In my mind, I thought I was going to be the next Bryant Gumbel or Greg Gumbel, 2 high-profile brothers who both carved a significant niche in network sportcasting business. Greg started at NBC5 in Chicago, while Bryant started at the NBC Sports Network level. Both were from Chicago's South Side, attending De La Salle High School with former Mayor Richard M. Daley, the longest-serving mayor in Chicago, 22 years, and the son, Richard J. Daley. Son and father, both were mayors. Both went to De La Salle High School, the Meteors. 5 mayors went to De La Salle High School, as a matter of fact, from Chicago, right? The Daleys attended, they were 2 of those mayors of 5, so they called it the Cradle of Mayors, De La Salle High School. Why is that important? Because the Gumbel brothers, one of their classmates was the mayor. And they called him the mayor before he was the mayor, so obviously they had some foresight into what he might become. During the 1980s, the Chicago influence in sports was huge because of guys like Brent Musburger. Some of these names you may not know, but they're sportscasters, and Mike Adamle in the early fashioning of sports television. Both Musburger and Adamle were products of Northwestern University, an institution that helped me shape my choices for the future. In fact, I did attend there in undergrad and graduate school. The Gumbel brothers became the example for how to rise up in the sports world. Greg was with CBS Sports, Bryant started with NBC Sports, and then became the first black male host of The Today Show in 1982, which was significant, with Jane Pauley and Willard Scott. They have different hosts now, I think Hoda Kotb and somebody else, as I recall. The show originated in Chicago. Why was that significant? Because it gave me an opportunity to work with the show, that's why. I was a production assistant with my idol Bryant Gumbel for a week. The experience inspired me to go back to school, earn a master's degree in journalism, try to learn the business. Saw up close how Bryant Gumbel prepared and organized his notes for interviews with presidents, diplomats, heads of state, movie stars, great singers, performers, and global athletes. Gumbel was smart, he was dapper, intuitive, His career skyrocketed exponentially once he took over as the main anchor of the Today Show. He was a sports guy who made the jump from news successfully, from sports to news, which is difficult, especially that pressurized cooker that was the Today Show, probably the most coveted spot in news at the time, if you wanted it. Some critics labeled him arrogant, but there was no doubt he was competent. He made a great impact on aspiring young journalists like myself. Foundation of my journalism was set at Northwestern University, Medill, 1986. I covered the Evanston Police Beat, the underwater scuba team, then finally the Pentagon War College, go figure, was my beat as part of the great Washington, D.C. training program from Medill on Capitol Hill. What was I doing there? I'm a sports guy. The certain pride that all the students took in reporting Medill was you could feel it. It was great to be around it. There were Medill phrases hammered into your thinking as a reporter. If your mother says she loves you, you better check it out. You better ask her every day if she loves you. Don't assume that she loves you. That was the number one thing in reporting. Go find out. Do your fact digging, right? The other thing was bring home the bear. That is, bring home the important emphasis in the story. Make sure you bring that home so people understand it in plain language or whatever language you think they can understand it. I wrote a story on satellite sensing, which involves aerial photography, CIA reconnaissance, right? I earned an A in the class. It was during that story that I met the most impressive story source of all, the late Dino Brugioni, an intelligence analyst from the CIA. He advised 5 different presidents, was the curator of an exhibit in the Smithsonian Institute. Brugioni was considered the foremost imagery intelligence analyst. Tried to recruit me into the CIA's National Photographic Interpretation Center, but I became overwhelmed by the CIA. I didn't take the opportunity. Subject of aerial photography, fascinating all that it may be, I had my doubts about working for the CIA. Northwestern would sell our stories in small market newspapers to help us build professional portfolios. My stories would sell to the newspapers in Biloxi, Mississippi, Wilmington, North Carolina, Vineland, New Jersey, some of these places you may not have heard of. Most of the stories had nothing to do with sports. Gannett Publishing offered me the opportunity to write for USA Today, but I turned it down. To do what? To look for a television sports job. I never thought my opportunity in sports television in front of the camera would materialize, but it did, to my surprise. Started at Fox 32 News in Chicago as a production assistant in '87. 2 years in the trenches, ripping scripts for anchors, taking notes for reporters. Bruce Wolf, Dan Giggets, Tom Sherry. You may not remember these names, they're before your time, but all lessons learned became tools of the trade. My opportunity came when I was hired as host of ESPN's Black College Sports Today. It put me in the national spotlight, as a matter of fact, as a sports host. They would air once a week, 30 minutes. I was the primary writer, producer, and host. The effort was akin to writing a term paper every week. We would show video highlights for 7 teams and then roll scores over graphics for the rest of the 32 teams over energetic, sporty music. I was now living my dream. ESPN was putting me on everyone's television set at home. But no one told me about the burden of all families tied to production of the show. So my performance affected the ratings, good or bad, okay? Sometimes the stars align in your behalf beyond your control. When I got a phone call from my former employee, Fox 32 News, they wanted to see if I was available to work. 2 weeks on a fill-in shift for an anchor. What a dream, 2 weeks. I made more money in 2 weeks than I did the whole year at Fox 32. The plans were for me to cover the Walter Payton's Hall of Fame induction. I don't know if you remember Walter Payton, but he was a great running back for the Bears, right? And I had a chance to go to cover his Hall of Fame induction in Canton, Ohio, which is the home of the Hall of Fame. And if you're a sports fan or if you're not, if you're an old running back like me, you're going to, of course, jump at that opportunity. I was returning home to the station where I started as a production assistant. So I went full circle. They almost didn't let me get on the air because people were so crazy about me returning that day. and anchoring instead of being a production assistant. This was one of the most exciting, gratifying moments of my life. Of course, I just told you I played running back, and of course, Walter Payton was a great running back, so I watched him as a kid. Put it in context, Payton in 1993 held the record for the most yards in the NFL, 16,726 yards in 13 seasons, a great feat in and of itself. Eventually, Emmitt Smith of the Dallas Cowboys broke his record, still holds at 18,355. This was my dream story to cover this. Never thought I would take a visit to the vaunted Football Hall of Fame and see many of the players that I grew up watching on NFL films and John Facenda and seeing them every Sunday during football games. My greatest memory was the night before the ceremony induction dinner. This is before the actual induction to the Hall of Fame, right? We have the big dinner there, right? And I can't control myself with all the former Hall of Fame jacket winners there wearing their gold jackets in one room on, let's say, on a Friday night, right? The fan in me wanted to run around and get all their autographs, but obviously I couldn't do that. I was a reporter. I sat down next to the sports announcer, Kurt Gowdy. You may not remember, but he was a great announcer for NBC. And on my right, and then Chicago Bears Hall of Famer on my left, Gale Sayers, one of the greatest Bears running backs of all time, was on my left. We began talking about the qualities that made Walter Payton, sweetness, one of the great running backs of all time. Durability, versatility, never say die attitude, and was infectious to anybody around him. It was football heaven. His teammates knew it. Walter was one of a kind. Well, who were some of the members in that induction class that day? Boy, was I lucky. Bill Walsh, head coach of the 49ers, right? One of the top coaches of all time at that time. Chuck Noll from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Larry Little from the undefeated 16-0 Miami Dolphins team, still undefeated to this day. Nobody's matched it. And Dan Fouts from the San Diego Chargers, a great quarterback. That was my induction class, and I got the whole conversation with all of them, most of the time talking to, actually, Bill Walsh, because Bill Walsh had coached my coach at Northwestern, Dennis Green. The Bears are exactly who they thought we were, okay? That Dennis Green, right? So I had a great conversation with him because he launched all these programs that help coaches get into the NFL, and Dennis was part of that. The day of Walter's induction, his son Jarrett Payton read the introduction. He was only 12 years old at that time, not the WGN sports anchor that he is today. And so finally, Walter's message still resonates with me today during the enshrinement. His speech emphasized that while life is short, the friendships made along the way are what mean the most. The people you engage, right? The experiences that you take with you. Thank you.
I think there's only one word for that, right, DJ? Sweetness. Who do you guys want to hear from next? There you go, Elmore.
My story begins on a cold February night in 2017. I left school late, having sold concessions at the basketball game with the Coding Cats Club. A month and a half into the new year, I was determined to keep my New Year's resolution of getting more sleep, so I headed home and went straight to bed. At around 2 a.m., I was jolted from a deep sleep by a loud crash, accompanied by the sound of breaking glass. I jumped out of bed just in time to see my cat racing down the hall. Certain he had managed to knock over a cabinet in the dining room, I ran downstairs to survey the damage. Expecting to see broken glass everywhere, I was surprised to find nothing out of place. After checking the rest of the main level of the house, I still had no explanation as to what had happened. Now I started to worry. My kids were grown, and my cat and I were the only ones living in the house at the time. Was there an intruder in the house? maybe hiding in a closed room or the basement or the garage. I worked up the courage to investigate. I cautiously checked every room. I opened the door to my son's room and I saw it. A bookshelf had crashed to the floor with its contents, CDs in plastic cases scattered everywhere. But what made the sturdy shelf suddenly fall from the wall where it had been hanging for years? Finding no clues as to the cause, I closed the door, cleaning up would have to wait, and headed back to my room. I tried to come up with a logical explanation. I even turned on the news, hoping to learn we'd had an earthquake. But nothing. Now I was really afraid. To understand my fear, we need to go back several years to a time when I was still married and my kids were in junior high. My husband, Clark, had been away all weekend. The kids were already in bed when he came home that Sunday evening. Before we went to sleep, we could hear our daughter Amber in her room. She kept getting out of bed and then back in bed. We expected her to eventually open the door and come out of her room, but she never did. The next morning, Clark told me he had woken up during the night to see a woman hanging from the ceiling fan. He said he couldn't breathe and that he had tried to wake me. Well, I thought, of course it was just a dream. But he swore it was not a dream. And in the 20 years we'd been together, nothing like this had ever happened before. He left for work, and I was still sure he had just had a very vivid dream. Later, when Amber woke up, I asked her why she kept getting out of bed. Her answer stunned me. She said, "That lady wouldn't leave." She went on to explain that there had been a woman standing at the foot of her bed. Amber kept getting up to run out of the room, but instead jumped back into bed because the woman was in her way. Over the years, other incidents followed. Once, Amber was sitting in her room when one of the blades from her ceiling fan broke off and dropped to the floor for no apparent reason. Another happened when she was in high school. I was in the kitchen one morning when she came downstairs earlier than usual. I said, "You're up early." She replied, "Well, you flung my door open. What are you so mad about?" Needless to say, I had not flung her door open. Her dad was out of town and her brother was still sound asleep. There was no one in the house to fling her door open. So back to that night in 2017, I sat on the edge of my bed, afraid to go back to sleep. So much for my New Year's resolution. The next morning, I called Clark to tell him what had happened. His immediate response, "It must have been the ghost." We both laughed it off. Just a couple of weeks later, I came downstairs one morning to find a large wall-mounted speaker dangling by its wires. There was a gaping hole in the drywall and where the anchor had ripped out and a trail of gouges left by the speaker as it made its descent. Clark agreed to stop by the house on his lunch break to check it out. He texted me later to say there's nothing wrong with the drywall itself, and the anchor was meant to hold 100 pounds. He could see no reason for it to have come out of the wall. He offered to fix it for me. My reply, "Thank you, and could you please take the ghost with you when you leave?"
All right, you keeping the story straight? Coming up with questions? Ready to play detective? One more story first. Come on up, Rende.
All right. The story that I'm going to share with you today is in honor of March Madness and all the college basketball fans out there. So, it was the fall of my senior year in college, and I was working my usual shift at the tutoring center on campus. When things were slow, we were allowed to work on our own homework. So there I was, head down, completely focused on my calculus assignment, not really paying attention to anything around me. All of a sudden, a shadow fell across my papers. I looked up and up and up, and there he was, James Augustine, starting center for the Illinois basketball team. I was told to come over here, he said casually. They said you could help me with my math homework. Sure, I squeaked. Okay, before I go any further, I need to set the stage for you here. This was peak Illinois basketball. They were a winning team, predicted to go to the Final Four that year, and everyone knew the big names on campus. Dee Brown, Darren Williams, Luther Head, and James Augustine. This was about as close as you could get to meeting a celebrity. So he sat down, we worked through his math problems, and somehow, despite my initial panic, it went well. The next week, he came back, and then the week after that, and the week after that. Naturally, I assumed this was because I was an outstanding tutor. Clearly, my mathematical brilliance was the draw. Then, at one of our weekly visits, he walked in holding a Starbucks cup. My treat, he said. And it wasn't just any Starbucks drink, it was a vanilla latte, the exact same drink that I had during one of our earlier sessions. The week after that, he brought something else, 2 tickets. To the orange and blue scrimmage, he said. Thought you might want to come sit behind the bench. So the week after the scrimmage, at the end of our now weekly tutoring session, he stayed late and asked to walk me home. Before we parted ways, he asked if I wanted to go grab a bite to eat sometime. So, it was the night of the big date. I was a little nervous. I told myself, act cool, casual, unimpressed. This was no big deal. We showed up to the restaurant, and after about 20 minutes, I knew. This was the most awkward date of my life. We had absolutely nothing in common, long, painful silences. Every attempt I made to change the topic somehow circled back to basketball. I learned more about defensive rebound strategy than I ever wanted to know. And by the time dessert rolled around, I was mentally calculating escape routes. So the next week, I traded my tutoring shift, and I just couldn't risk running into him again. And that, friends, is a story of how I briefly tutored and then quietly avoided Illini basketball royalty James Augustine.
All right, I'm gonna grab a mic for our storytellers. We gotta bring Mrs. Singleton out in about 9 minutes or so. Hang tight. That gives you guys time to ask questions to try and figure out who's lying, who's telling the truth. If you have a question, raise your hand. State after we call on you who the question is for. Make sure it's loud and clear, and then get your question heard. Who has a question for our storytellers? Yes, back there.
You said, what position did I play in high school? I played tailback. That would be the running back. Same terminology, really.
Next question. Yes.
DJ, what was Walter Payton wearing that night?
Let's see. Sweetness was he didn't like dress up a lot for things, so he was rather casual, but of course, being who he is, he has access. He can get pretty much the things that he wants to. He drove a lot of upscale cars, but he dressed casually most of the time. So he's probably dressed casually that night.
I mean, to be fair, how many years ago?
What's that?
How many years ago was that now?
Woo! Well, that was 1993.
Okay.
When he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So that goes that far back. But it was memorable for me. It was great.
Next question. Yes.
Did we miss where I was helping him with math homework? I don't know. I graduated college in 2005, so that was, you do the math, about 20 years ago. I don't remember.
I want to say it was 32, but I'm not sure. Next question. Yes.
This is Rende. Yeah. Were you guys the same age at this time?
Okay, so basketball, I feel like sports are a little weird. I know that I think he was a year younger than me. But, I don't know. Close.
Front row, go for it.
Yeah.
You were at the tutoring center.
Yes.
So why did somebody tell him to come for you for help?
Because there were other subjects that also you could get tutoring with at the tutoring center. It was not just for math. What?
Why not that teacher helping him?
Because this was a place where a student could go for help. I don't know. It's called the Irwin Center. Feel free to look it up.
I love that the assumption is that they always go to the teacher for help.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we
Mhm.
experience that all the time.
No.
Right. Yes, red t-shirt, go for it.
Oh, yeah. What school did I go to? High school? Did I go to? I don't know. I don't know what high school, I'm sorry, I can't hear your question, Ollie.
So you know which high school you went to.
I do know what high school I went to, yes. I went to Conant, but I don't think that's what you were asking.
You're gonna have to raise your hand high, because yes, right in the middle, go for it.
DJ, you were talking about two guys at the beginning. Did you say they were your siblings?
I'm sorry?
You were talking about two guys at the beginning. Did you say they were your siblings?
Oh, the Gumbel brothers, I think she's asking about.
No, they weren't my siblings, but they were role models, and during that time period, they were probably the most prominent voices in sports in Chicago. It was hard to ignore them because you turn on your channel, you'd see them every night. And not just in sports. They would do magazine shows, news shows, you name it, they did it all. So that's what got my attention.
Okay, Arna.
This is for Miss Rende. What was the most attractive thing about him?
I mean, probably his bald head, right? I mean, that's what we go with. I don't know. It was really cool, right? Like, he was a college basketball player and showing some attention. It was cool.
It wasn't like the soul patchy sort of thing you had going on, and no, that wasn't so attractive. Yeah, go for it.
This was for Elmore. Is your house like old, or is there any weird history with it?
We were only the second owners of the house, and nothing unusual had happened there. We knew the former owners, yeah.
Yes.
Do you still live in that house?
I do.
Very far back.
Did you give the ghost a name?
No, we did not name the ghost.
Over here on my right.
Say that again? I think I have not had any experiences since 2017.
Long sleeve white t-shirt on the left. No, yes. No? Okay. Far back, corner.
DJ, what did you guys eat that night?
I believe we ate lemon chicken with vegetables. That's what we did.
Right in the middle here.
Elmore, have you ever seen the ghost, like, or was it just your kids and your husband?
I personally never saw the ghost. I sometimes wonder if my cat sees the ghost. He'll sometimes be laying on my lap, sound asleep, and then suddenly bolt up and stare at something that I can't see.
Yeah, way north side. Yep. Yep, you.
Miss Rende, what homework were you working on at the beginning of the story?
Calculus.
All right, last two questions from up front. One and then two. Wyatt, go for it.
Is it possible that the cat opened the door to your son's room? Daughter.
It is not possible that the cat opened the door, no.
All right, last question.
What year did your daughter graduate? High school. Graduate high school.
She graduated high school in 2010.
All right, that's a lot of questions. That's some answers. Think about it. Who do you think is the liar? We're going to vote by standing up. So, if you think that Ms. Elmore is the liar, please stand up. Ooh. Oh, they just keep rising. Not unlike the dead. Yeah, okay, thanks guys. You may sit down. If you think Ms. Rende is the liar, stand up. Definitely not as many. All right, you may sit down. And if you think DJ's the liar, ooh, that's even more than Rende, I think. All right, you may sit down. Would the real liar please stand up? And that's how it's done, folks. Nicely done, James Augustine. Oh boy. Stuff of nightmares. All right, you guys can hang tight because we may have questions for you in a second. If you forgot, Mrs. Singleton's been backstage writing a poem for the past however many minutes. It is time to bring her out and see her work. If we could bring up the list of words again, that would be awesome. And the poem too, I suppose.
Okay, I'm gonna admit hypertension was really hard to work with. So this is what I came up with. I actually started with something different because hypertension immediately made me think of stress, and it's a stressful time of year for teachers, and so I started writing a poem that was about teachers, and I was like, I don't want to write about that. So instead, I wrote this: living without fear. What does it mean to be myself, to have all my idiosyncrasies on display, to present the myriad of my interests? For now, I hide what I love in a satchel held close to my chest, sporadically emerging only when it's safe. What I have to offer are fathomless thoughts, ideas, promises, a hippopotamus worth of potential. We all presumably have more than we show, more depth than the sonorous bells toll. As the wheel turns and life moves by, I have to wonder if the splinters I share are enough, if the frame being more empty than full is enough, if the lavender growing in the rain is enough. They're not. Though I may slip, I'm choosing to be myself, fully, freely me. And while hypertension may result, I'll know that I am living the way I am meant to be.
All right, Mrs. Singleton, you said hypertension was the most difficult one, right?
Yes.
First off, congratulations on working in a hippopotamus, too.
Hippopotamus was actually quite easy. As soon as I thought of like a simile or metaphor, I was like, oh, I'll just think of something that's like large. So originally, in my original poem, it was about like a large pile of papers to grade. Like I said, I didn't like that topic. So then I switched it to this. And this one actually got inspired by idiosyncrasy. That was the one that I like looked some of the words up too. I was defining some of them because I was like, sonorous, I know that word, but I don't exactly know what it means. And then I was looking at to see like what different endings I could use. Like fathom means something that's different than fathomless. And I didn't have any rules correct about changing endings.
You're correct.
Okay, cool.
So was hypertension the last word you used, or was it?
It was the last word because I was getting to the end and I was like, oh shoot, I haven't used that word. I had slip and hypertension. I actually, with this one, I think it's because I did a draft of something else first. I got comfortable with some of the words. So then this one, it became a lot easier to come up with ideas. Lavender was also a little tricky. Lavender actually grows best when it's in an arid place or a dry place. So that's why I used it that way. If the lavender growing in the rain is enough, because it's not going to grow as well in a wet climate. So.
I noticed you came out from backstage with a few minutes to spare. Did you have time after you had technically gotten all the words on the page to craft things around a little bit, or?
Yes. And part of it was I wanted to hear their questions and like what you guys, I love this activity, the 2 truths and a lie, so I wanted to see part of it. And then while you guys were answering your questions, I realized the last line I had written in past tense, and I was like, no, I want it to be in present tense, and even now I'm not really loving, like, I like part of the last line, but I don't love the verb tense. I feel like that needs a little more work.
It's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
Ms. Rende, a question for you. What was the most difficult part about writing this piece of fiction?
The whole thing. This was really hard for me. Like, this is way out of my comfort zone, and I can't believe I agreed to do it. So, but I don't know. I think just trying to make it, especially telling something not true, trying to find the balance between making it seem believable but not going too overboard, and like that balance was hard.
That makes sense. Folks, how many of you have seen either of these events at a Writers' Expo in previous years? Okay, so you may have noticed it's always staff members. It doesn't have to be. We would love to have students come on up for 2 truths and a lie, for impromptu poetry, whatever it might be. So again, consider it lots of ways to contribute to Writers' Expo in the future years. One more round of applause for all of our staff members. You've got about 15 seconds till the bell rings. Have a great day, folks.